This is not a topic that we can just talk about and then walk away and do whatever we want. We're really going to begin to look at where we started at the end of Matthew, the Great Commission in Matthew 28. And what I want you to understand is this is a command of Jesus. And it's a command that expects us to do something. And so if all we do is talk about it, we've really missed the whole point. When Jesus comes in Matthew 28, in verse 18, it says, "And Jesus came and said to them, 'All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore.'" I want to stop there and catch that. He's linking the command he's about to give to the fact that all authority in heaven and earth has been given to him. He's saying, based on this authority, I'm giving you this command. And so if we listen to this and all we do is talk about it and we don't do anything, we have woefully disappointed our Lord. Francis Chan has used an illustration I think really hit it well. He said, Christians are one of the only people in the world who think that talking about and studying something is the same as obeying it. And he uses this illustration and I think just makes the point. He said, if I told my daughter that she needs to clean her room, and then I left for work and came back and I said, is your room clean? She said, well, no, Dad, but I got a bunch of my friends together and we actually talked about what you mean by clean and room. And we've got a lot of really neat ideas on how to interpret that. In fact, we've decided to make a club and we're going to memorize this and we're going to be able to recite it verbatim, just word for word, in the original language that you said it in, Dad. We wouldn't count that as obedience. And as amused as the father might be, he wouldn't be impressed. Because the expectation was not that we talk and study, but that we do. And so when we talk about discipleship, what I want you to understand is it's a challenge. It's a personal challenge to each of you. And as we come to the end of our time talking about this, what I want you to really focus in on here is, what is God asking you to do? Because your issue is not with me. I leave. And if it was just my message, you are welcome to ignore it because I'm not that important. But when Jesus shows up and says, all authority on heaven and on earth has been given to me, therefore, you have to listen. And that challenge has to be personal. So it's a challenge. And so we're going to come in and come back to the Great Commission. We're going to try and tie up some of the things that we left unresolved when I first looked at it. Hopefully maybe make some sense of the long word I threw at you on the first day. And say, what does it mean to go forward from here and take this challenge seriously? So bring up the next slide. The first thing we need to talk about then, if we're saying we need to do something, is how do I know if I'm doing it? What counts as actually obeying this command? To take that analogy we used a second ago, if I said clean your room and I come back and you wash the dishes, is that good enough? Sometimes we can count any busy work as at least I did something. And I think a big question for us when we come into ministry is, what is success and what is failure? And this really comes home because it has to do with what is your value system. It really depends what you were planning to accomplish and what you were supposed to accomplish. Because in the example of someone being told to clean their room and then end up doing the dishes, they did succeed at doing the dishes. But if the expectation was cleaning the room, then they still failed at meeting the expectation. See, depending what the context is and what the value system is, what the expectations are, changes what counts as success and failure. And one of the things we need to come to terms with as we look at this Great Commission is ultimately this is Jesus' ministry. What I want us to come to understand as we start bringing this all together is that the discipleship of the Great Commission is the challenge to join Jesus in his mission of gathering to himself a people conformed to his life, submitted to his kingship, and drawing others into the same. But we're joining Jesus in his mission of calling to himself a people that are going to be conformed to his life, submitted to his kingship, and then also reproducing that, drawing others into it. But the trick here is to realize this is what Jesus is doing. And he says it's on the basis of my authority. This is what I'm doing, and I'm asking you to join me in it. It's what he's been doing for the entire book up to this point. Because this is key. Ultimately, Jesus is going to be the one that gets this ministry done. He's not actually saying that success here is going to be how many disciples you draw, but how faithfully you join him. That distinction is huge, and I draw that not just from this passage, but from passages we just didn't have time to look at because we're trying to cover all of Matthew in 3 days. But if you look back, you'll remember that when Jesus was calling the disciples and he sends them out on their little mission trip that we talked about when we talked about release yesterday, right before he sends them out, it says Jesus looked at the crowds and he was moved with compassion. And he turns to his disciples. He takes a moment here and says, disciples, come receive this. And he says, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few, which was kind of, we expected that from Jesus. He looks out, he's moved with compassion, sure. And then he does something really, really unusual. He doesn't say, go get them, boys. He says, pray therefore the Lord of the harvest that he would raise up laborers for his harvest. And he models for us this key thing, is that authority is God's, and that the ministry is God and Christ's ministry that they are doing. And so it's not just that we go do busy work, but that we remain submitted to him and do the work he would have us do. Another example that would be in the Sermon on the Mount, which we were kind of looking at both sides of as we were going through watching discipleship. When Jesus talks about those who are his, he says, many will come to me in that day and say, Lord, Lord, did we not? And they list really cool things they do. Cast out demons in your name, heal people in your name. And I will say to you, depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. I never knew you. And then he goes on, and the next story is connected to it. He says, so this is the one. And he talks about the two people who build their houses, one on a rock and one on sand. And what he defines the person as, the one that is actually not going to be turned away as not knowing him, and who is the one who hears these words of mine and does them. And you need to catch that. It's not just that it's the one who did stuff, because the people in the preceding story did lots of stuff. If it's just that you did stuff, I would think casting out demons and healing people in Jesus' name would be doing stuff. The issue was that they were workers of lawlessness, that the actions they were doing were not submitted to him. They were calling their own shots. Versus the guy in the next story who hears from Jesus, and the doing that he accomplishes is an obedience to him. It's not just that we do good things, it's that we walk with Jesus in submission to him. So success isn't how many good deeds you do. Success in the Great Commission isn't how many people you witness to. Success in the Great Commission is faithfulness to the one who commissioned you. Catch that. Success is faithfulness to the one who commissions you. Ultimately, it's going to be his authority and power that makes the results. Results are his. Faithfulness is our part. So it's not about numbers. I mean, if we said success is just about the results, then we would have to conclude that Jesus' ministry was a failure. We already looked at an example of some men who wanted to follow Jesus and then didn't. Well, Jesus, you failed in making disciples. You turned them away. What about the guys that do follow him? One of them's Judas. He turns his back on Jesus. So are we going to say that Jesus' ministry is a failure, that discipleship that doesn't yield 100% results is a failure? Or do we say no? Jesus modeled to us what successful discipleship looks like, because he walked in faithfulness to his Father, and when he's on his knees in the garden, he says, not my will, but thy will be done. Success is submission and faithfulness. You need to have that as your value system, because when you're asking yourself, what's the right thing to do here in tough decisions, you can go the pragmatic way and say, well, what's going to give me the best results? And you may compromise your faithfulness to your Lord. Or you can say, what does God ask of me? And the chief concern for me being that I am submitted and obeying him. That I go where he wants me to go, even if I don't understand the results. God has a knack of doing things that don't make sense. Take two examples that you know. Two examples that you know. Peter and Paul. Two men that God used mightily in ministry. Peter is a Galilean fisherman, not very educated. In fact, that's the first observation that people in Acts make about him. They perceived that they were uneducated men. Paul, Pharisee of Pharisees, trained in the school of Gamaliel. This is the dude. So then God sends Paul to the Jews, right? Because that would totally make sense. No, he sends him to the Gentiles, and he grabs stinky fisherman Peter, and he sends him to the Jews. This is our God. He doesn't always call us to do the most logical thing. And if you go by results, you might miss what your Lord is asking you to do. You go by faithfulness. And then if you can say with a clear conscience that what you've been doing in the ministry you have labored under is what God has asked you to do, I don't care if nobody has responded. That is a success. This is key. There have been many men who've been called of God to go minister in settings where the results just didn't show up. And if we make our decision just on this basis of results, we might miss what God wants to do. In my own life, I've come to that spot more than once. I've shared with you bits about my ministry, and I do local ministry. I work with a couple teams here in Lancaster area. And at one point, our national ministry was working through some issues, and they invited the different directors of the local teams to send some proposals out. And so I typed up a proposal on what our national ministry's philosophy of discipleship should be. It doesn't surprise you that that's what I wanted to write my proposal on, because that's sort of my whole mindset. I sent it into them, and the result was the national board unanimously voting to invite me to move out to headquarters and join headquarters staff as the new executive director. Now that's kind of flattering. And if you're just going for career advancement, that's your opportunity to go from nobody guy sitting in Pennsylvania with a couple teams, to executive director of a national, going on international ministry. If it's just results that we're after, I shouldn't be here today. But if success is measured in faithfulness, then I had to do something different, which was tell them, let me pray about it and see what the Lord wants to do. And as I spent time seeking the Lord, I had a real strong sense that no, this wasn't where God wanted me, that what I was doing, as unknown and very poorly supported financially as it was His call on my life. And so faithfulness and success was to call him up and say, hey, I'm really honored that you would offer me this position. Hope you find somebody for that position, because I am going to continue to run around with a bunch of teenagers in Lancaster County. Some folks would say, you missed your chance. And others would say, no, you honor God. And it comes down to your value system. And we all have value systems. And so many times we don't critically analyze what the value system we carry is, and then we come into the commands of Jesus and we struggle to obey them because we don't actually know how to measure what it means to obey. I think for a lot of us, Jesus is asking us to clean the room and we're washing the dishes. We just missed the point. So catch this. Jesus has modeled through His ministry, and this sets up the context of when He gives a command, His expectation from the disciples at this point, from what they've seen Him preach, from what they've seen Him model, so what He's asking is that they obey with faithfulness. And we'll touch on this more in a sec, but that would be why He says, behold, I go with you. And I'll be with you always, because it isn't about just go do this on your own and bring back some great results. It's, we're going forward. I'm going to continue the ministry I started, and I'm asking you, will you go with me and stay with me as I do it? So you can bring up the next slide. The big thing we have to get into our heads, and this is just so hard, is that it's about faithfulness and not numbers. In ministry circles, we make this hard on each other, right? When pastors get together, the first question is, so how's your church doing? How many people are you running in attendance these days? We just go ahead and summarize that that's the success of your ministry is Sunday attendance. We do that in our own ministries. I work with youth. So is the success of a youth ministry the numbers? Or is the success of the youth group the faithfulness of those who are ministering to youth, that they are faithfully modeling Christ in their youth? Is success for those youth whether they are just getting lots more people to come, or that they're actually becoming more like Christ because they are faithfully submitting to Him? Do we want to have 100 kids who don't even know what their faith means and don't live at all like Jesus, or do we want to have 5 kids who are becoming more and more like Christ and showing Him to the world around them? So we have to ask ourselves what we're going to use as our measuring stick. Faithfulness, not numbers. Etch that into your mind, because it'll slip out real quick the next meeting you're in. Now let's come and let's unpack the Great Commission. I need to deal with this next word. So if you go to the next slide, it says go. All right? This is where I used the words that your brain's all checked out on Sunday, where I said that it was a participle. It was an imperfect participle of the aorist tense, that it stands for attendant circumstance. And a lot of you said, was that Greek or was that really English? There might be a few grammar geeks in the group who are like, that was really cool. But I doubt it. The reason we talked about go initially is I wanted you to understand that the main point of the Great Commission is discipleship, that it is the main verb. But it doesn't mean that this word doesn't exist. It is part of the Great Commission. We need to understand its relationship. You can bring the next slide up. Essentially what it means is that it piggybacks on the other word. That would be a much simpler way of saying it. So you got the little guy on the slide piggybacking on the other guy. What it means is it's an action idea that doesn't stand by itself. It is actually something that has to happen simultaneous to the main action. It gets its meaning from the main action of the sentence. And even would carry the idea that it's a necessary prerequisite for the other action. These sort of grammar constructions elsewhere in Scripture would be times when it tells Joseph to rise up and take his wife to Egypt. The idea being not that he should rise up and then a couple days later take his wife to Egypt. These are one action, but if he doesn't rise up, they're not going to Egypt. It's a necessary prerequisite of this one instantaneous movement that's expected. And so here when we come to the Great Commission, what it's telling us is you can't do discipleship holding still. This is why I stress so heavily that if all we do is listen and talk about it, I know for sure we're not doing discipleship. Because discipleship in the Lord's command is expected to be active. The word for go here is this idea of a journey or a travel. And it's an incomplete travel. He's going, this is what you're just always going to be doing. You're going to be staying active in my service, so get moving. That's what he's saying. Because discipleship happens when we are actively serving the Lord. If you're not doing something for the Lord, you cannot make disciples and you cannot be a disciple. That should be gravely disturbing for us because the majority expectation for American Christianity is that about 10% of the church does 90% of the ministry. The rest of us show up and we consider that our doing activity is just that we finance it. And I've sat on a church board. I do understand budget's a big discussion. I understand that the older generation is the one that finances the church the most. I know that. You're also the ones we need the most to get busy because you bring maturity. You're the ones who can invest in a younger person and help them learn how to step into ministry. And if we don't have you active, the rest of us are just running around blind. And so I want to challenge you. If you can't think of something in your life that you are doing that God is using to further His kingdom, I do not believe you are actually taking the challenge of the Great Commission. You might have talked about it and you might agree with it. But if you're not doing something, you're not able to fulfill this command. Because you have to go in order to make disciples. These are inseparable ideas, and that's true just on a raw grammatical sense of the way Jesus decided to say it. And so, this should challenge some of the ways we think, all right? We often think that maturity is a prerequisite to service, and this would actually flip that and go, service is a prerequisite to maturity. You're not going to get discipled if you don't start doing something. And so if you're doing that whole idea of, well, I would love to serve in the church, but I don't know anything. And you'll say that way until you start getting busy. You need to step in and say, I'm willing to serve and I would like to be helped. Can we get someone to come alongside and disciple me? But if you always use maturity as the excuse, you'll never go, and so you'll never be made into a disciple, and you'll certainly never disciple anyone else. It can be anything. I really believe you can disciple through ushers ministry. But you do need to ask yourself, how do I get busy and begin to do something for God's kingdom as an outlet for me to be invested in by godly men and women and to invest in others as well? The command requires activity. And so we cannot accept that if we're going to be a Great Commission believer, that inactivity for the majority is acceptable. That would not be faithfulness and submission. That would be failure. So we've got this issue of go. You cannot disciple or be discipled until you start to do something. But now let's put some encouragement on here. Bring up the next slide. We want to talk about the fact that Jesus doesn't just leave them hanging. Get busy and see you later. One of the great things about the Great Commission is Jesus' promise to go with us. Behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. When you step out in this way, no matter how inadequate you may feel, you don't go alone, and you have the one who is most adequate with you. This is one of those things I think we can hear, but it's hard for us to believe. How competent is Jesus? How mature is Jesus? You think of the excuses we make for why I can't do ministry. It's not about you. Jesus goes with you. He stands there with all authority in heaven and earth, and he goes with you. His power goes with you. It's about you being willing more than it's about you being confident. I know we've hit that before, but bring this back around, because when you say, I couldn't possibly be used by God in this way, what you're actually saying, whether you think it through or not, is Jesus couldn't possibly do this ministry. Because he goes with you. And if that's what he's asking of you, I think he's up for it. You know, I haven't talked much about how old I am. I've told you that I've been doing ministry for 12 years. I'm 29 years old, so you can do a little bit of math and figure out how old I was when I got into ministry. And I would agree with you, it's too young. I had no idea what I was doing. And I was not good at it. It was never about me. What I did see was a Jesus who goes with me. He led me there, he called me. And every time I got in over my head, he was there. With wisdom that transcended my years, with protection that I didn't even realize was happening till later, and I said, wow, that could have gone badly. He went with me. And so when I say I really believe that you can step out and be used and that Jesus won't leave you hanging, I say that from my own experience as much as I say it from the text. I know Scripture teaches it, but I know for me it was a hard battle to accept the reality of that truth. That what he's asking us for is to enter into a relational ministry. We're saying, Jesus, I know that you are building your kingdom, and I want to be busy building it with you. Where would you have me serve you? Where are you going? And let me go with you. His presence is promised, but not the results. He didn't say, go make disciples of all nations, teaching them, baptizing them, and behold, I will give you lots of converts. He promised, and behold, I'll be with you. And that's the glorious thing, is what you will find is that when you step out into active service with Jesus, you get to know Jesus better. There are things in my walk with God that I don't think I could have learned any other way. I probably heard them in sermons, but there's a difference between hearing and really knowing something. Moving into an experiential relationship with Jesus deepened my love for my Lord, deepened my sense for his heart and what he's passionate about and what grieves him. I didn't get that just because I read it. I got it because as I read it, I went out there and did it, and I got to be next to Jesus as he grieved. And if you've ever had him share his heart with you as you work with somebody, you'll find that you do draw closer to Jesus, and you do discover the wonder of his presence as you go. I think so often we have a very dead spirituality in our churches because we also have a very dead practice. And we're all waiting for Jesus to become more real to us, and yet we won't go and seek him. We forget that he's the Lord who said, seek me and you will find me, if you seek me with all your heart. He expects a pursuit. And so many of us say, I'm just going to sit here till God shows himself to me, and then get angry at him when he doesn't. He's made clear to us what needs to happen. You need to step out in faith and in active obedience and say, Lord, I know you've asked me to serve your kingdom. And in faith and in obedience, step out. And I really want to encourage you that as you do, you will find him there in deeper ways. This is what Jesus means when he says, verily I say to you, when you do it to the least of these, you've done it unto me. That so often in service, whether it be reaching out to the weak and the poor among us, in sharing our faith, we find him there. We understand him better. And so it's a relational. It's not always a logical move, but it is a move with Jesus. And so our chief concerns needs to be that we have faithfulness to that relationship. That our chief concern is what keeps me at peace with my Lord? What can I do here that actually matches up with the burdens he's putting on my heart, or the things he's showing me from his word, the things he's showing me from biblical counsel around me? Because my chief concern is not what's the most logical or what's the most profitable. I just want to know what Jesus is doing so that I can stay with him. I should be more concerned that I am suffering in my relationship with Christ than whether there are results in my ministry. My father had a friend who was an evangelist, led many evangelistic crusades, and saw many folks respond. He would preach the gospel, people would come forward. And after something like 4 or 5 years of doing that, he got saved himself. The results were there, but I wouldn't say that his ministry was as much of a success in those early years. He didn't even know the one he was trying to serve. Don't lose Jesus in the midst of this pursuit. Make the pursuit be about him and seeking him. When I call you to discipleship, when I challenge you and say you need to get busy, it's not because I'm trying to lecture you or get you to show some kind of piety. I know the joy of finding Jesus in service. I know it's a promised joy. I don't have to worry that you'll step out and not find him there. I look at him standing here fully glorified with all authority, and this is his promise. He will be with you. That's what I want for you. I don't actually remember what the next slide is, so you can just go ahead and put it up. That the life of Christ is imparted to the believer by the Holy Spirit. When he says, I'll be with you, we know he doesn't mean literally that he was just going to follow him around physically, because the next thing he does in Acts is ascend. So when we talk about this presence of Christ, what we're saying, what we understand theologically is that when you come to Christ, God's Spirit comes into you and he ministers the life of Christ to you. And so this is how Christ is actually able to be present with every last one of us. It's going to happen inside of us by the work of the Holy Spirit. But as you participate with His Spirit by obedience to Christ's command, I think you're going to find that you move into harmony with God. And you're going to know and understand His presence in His life fuller. And this becomes that process that you become more and more like Him as you are with Him. So the discipleship of the Great Commission is an impossible, unpredictable challenge to join Jesus in His mission. I say impossible because that's even what the disciples saw when the rich young man came to Jesus and walked away, and Jesus said it's very difficult for a rich person to follow Him. They said, well, this is impossible. And He said, with man it is impossible, but with God all things are possible. He points out that the results are going to have to be done by God because you can't make it happen. So it's an impossible, unpredictable challenge to join Jesus in His mission of gathering to Himself a people conformed to His life, submitted to His kingship, and drawing others to the same. It's a call to a particular kind of discipleship that does not guarantee success in numbers, but commits itself to faithfulness, a discipleship that prioritizes relationship with Jesus over performance and product, a discipleship that is actively ongoing. It's a discipleship that's modeled after the practical example of Jesus and just simply passes on what He began. This is the discipleship of the Great Commission. Jesus is waiting. Who will go with Him? I really think you take one little step of obedience, and it may seem like a nothing, but God has a plan. And in His sovereignty and in His wisdom, He will guide you. You just need to be obedient and begin to go.